New highway rules are starting soon, and most American drivers over 60 will be fined before they even realize what changed. Pull over and read this before you drive anywhere on I-90 or any major highway in the coming days. Starting immediately across the I-90 corridor and expanding nationally, new highway rules and updated traffic law enforcement standards are catching American drivers completely off guard. We are not talking about minor adjustments that officers will overlook during a grace period. We are talking about strict, immediate enforcement with fines starting the moment you make a mistake that was perfectly acceptable just days ago. The specific population that law enforcement data shows as being cited at the highest rate under several of these new rules is drivers over the age of 60. Here's the part that should genuinely concern you. Most of the drivers over 60 who will be fined in the coming weeks will not be reckless. They will not be speeders who blow through construction zones at dangerous speeds. They will be ordinary, careful, responsible drivers who simply did not know the rules changed. Drivers who merged onto I-90 the same way they have for 30 years. Drivers who parked in the same spot they have used every Tuesday morning for a decade. Drivers who held their phone at a red light without making a single call because they were taught that was harmless. Those drivers are going to receive fines they never saw coming. Some of them will receive penalty points that push their insurance premiums up by hundreds of dollars annually. Some will face mandatory traffic school requirements, and a smaller but significant number will face license reviews that threaten their ability to drive independently. For someone over 60, this is not just a financial consequence. It is a direct threat to their mobility, their independence, and their quality of life. The ability to drive to the grocery store, to get to a medical appointment, to visit family, to simply get from one place to another without depending on other people is something that most drivers over 60 have never seriously considered losing. Several of these rule changes, in combination with the tightened license review thresholds I will explain later, create a realistic pathway from a single routine traffic stop to a formal license review that most people in this age group are not aware exists. This guide covers every major highway rule change currently taking effect along I-90 and across the national highway system, which drivers face the greatest risk under each specific change, and precisely what you need to do before your next drive to make sure you are fully protected. Every update in this guide is based on publicly available traffic law revisions, official state DMV guidance, and law enforcement priority announcements. Read every section and share this with every driver you care about because the information here could genuinely save you from a fine, a point on your record, or something far more serious. The first rule change is the one that will catch the most drivers. It involves construction zone speed enforcement, and the change is specific enough that experienced drivers who believe they fully understand construction zone rules will be caught by it. Construction zone traffic laws have existed for decades. Every driver knows the basic concept. Slow down in work zones. Be careful around construction crews. Respect the reduced speed limits. But here is exactly what changed and why it matters so much. Particularly for drivers over 60 who may have been following the same mental model of construction zone rules for 30 or 40 years. Previously, the enhanced fine rule for construction zones was triggered based in part on whether workers were physically present and actively working in the zone. You would see signs that said fines doubled when workers are present. If the crew was on a lunch break, if the work had paused for the day, if you drove through at 6 in the morning before anyone arrived on site. The legal situation regarding the enhanced penalty was more nuanced than it is now. That distinction has been eliminated under the current enforcement standard being applied on I-90 and across highway construction zones nationally. Enhanced fines now apply at all times in any designated construction zone. The presence of construction zone signs is now legally sufficient to trigger the enhanced penalty. It does not matter whether a single worker is visible. It does not matter what time of day or night you drive through. It does not matter whether any construction activity is visibly occurring at the moment you pass through. If construction zone signs are posted, enhanced penalties apply, period. Enforcement officers have publicly confirmed that they are strictly issuing citations to any driver exceeding the posted construction zone speed limit by even 1 mile per hour above the posted limit. There is no buffer. There is no informal grace zone. 1 mile per hour over the construction zone speed limit is now a citable offense subject to enhanced fine penalties. Along the I-90 corridor, where construction projects are currently active in multiple states, including Washington, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and New York, this rule is being enforced actively and consistently. What this means practically for your daily driving is straightforward. The moment you see construction zone signs on any highway, you treat that zone as if an entire crew of workers is standing directly beside your vehicle. You bring your speed down to the posted limit immediately, not gradually as you pass through the initial warning signs, but immediately when you see the first sign indicating the zone has begun. You maintain that speed throughout the entire designated zone, not just in the sections where you can see active work, and you do not resume your normal highway speed until you have fully cleared the zone and passed the signs indicating the construction zone has ended. Many drivers over 60 have a habit of watching for workers as the visual trigger for reducing speed. Under the current enforcement standard, that habit will generate fines consistently. The sign is the trigger, not the worker. The financial impact of a single construction zone violation under the enhanced fine standard can reach several $100s depending on your state. Add the insurance premium increases, triggered by a moving violation on your record, and the actual cost of one moment of inattention in a construction zone can easily exceed $1,000 in total consequences. This is a particularly significant concern for drivers on fixed retirement incomes for whom an unexpected $1,000 expense is not a minor inconvenience. The second rule change is the one that is going to generate the most disbelief from experienced drivers, particularly those who have been driving for 20, 30, or 40 years. If you are over 60, the merging behavior you were taught and have practiced your entire driving life may now constitute a traffic violation. The old common practice of slowing down significantly or coming to a near stop at the end of an entry ramp before attempting to merge into highway traffic has been officially updated in multiple states to reflect current traffic safety standards. Under the updated rules now being enforced, you are legally required to use the full length of the entry ramp to accelerate and match the speed of existing highway traffic before completing your merge. Deliberately slowing down or stopping at the merge point is now classified as creating a dangerous traffic condition. If you slow to a near stop on an entry ramp and the vehicle behind you must brake suddenly or swerve to avoid a collision, you bear legal responsibility for creating that hazard. This can result in a traffic citation even if no collision occurs. If a collision does occur behind you as a direct result of your sudden slowdown at the merge point, you can be held legally liable for that accident and any injuries or property damage that result. Law enforcement officers are specifically monitoring entry ramps during peak commute hours as part of the current enforcement priority push. The correct merging procedure under current traffic law is to use the acceleration lane fully, match the speed of the vehicles already traveling in the lane you are merging into, signal your intention to merge clearly and early, identify your gap in traffic, and complete your merge smoothly at highway speed without creating a speed differential that forces other drivers to react suddenly. If the entry ramp is too short or traffic conditions make it genuinely impossible to reach highway speed before the ramp ends, you should yield completely and wait for a safe gap rather than forcing a dangerous low-speed merge into high-speed traffic. What you cannot legally do under the current standard is slow to a crawl or stop at the merge point and then attempt to nose into moving traffic. Practice this, adjust your habits because this is an enforcement priority right now. For drivers over 60 who learned to merge on less congested highways decades ago, this is one of the most important habit changes you can make before your next highway drive. The third rule change involves prescription medication and driving. This section contains information that could have serious legal consequences for millions of American drivers over 60, particularly those managing chronic health conditions with prescription medications. Please read this section carefully and completely. Law enforcement officers now have expanded legal authority to request chemical testing of drivers suspected of impairment, even when no alcohol consumption is involved. Specifically, officers can now request a blood test or saliva test from any driver they have reasonable cause to believe may be impaired, and the suspected impairment can be attributed to prescription medication rather than alcohol or illegal substances. This is not a new concept in traffic law. Driving under the influence of impairing substances has always included prescription medications. What has changed is the enforcement priority. The expanded officer authority to request testing, and the updated thresholds used to determine whether detected medication levels constitute legal impairment. The reason this change affects drivers over 60 disproportionately is straightforward. Americans over 60 are more likely to take multiple prescription medications daily than younger drivers. And many of the medications that fall into categories with driving related warnings are medications that treat conditions particularly common in older adults. Certain categories of prescription medications that are commonly taken by American adults for legitimate medical conditions can result in a driving under the influence charge if they are detected in your system above specific threshold levels and your driving behavior gave the officer reasonable cause to initiate the stop. These categories include certain sleep aids and sedatives, certain anti-anxiety medications in the benzodiazepine family, certain prescription pain medications including opioid-based medications, some antihistamines prescribed for allergy management, and certain muscle relaxants. There is an additional dimension to this rule change that most coverage of it completely misses, and it is the dimension most relevant to drivers over 60. The legal standard for reasonable cause to initiate a stop does not require the officer to have observed clearly dangerous driving. It requires the officer to have a reasonable, articulable suspicion that the driver may be impaired. For older drivers, certain normal age-related driving behaviors, including slightly slower reaction times, wider turns, or more deliberate braking, can provide the basis for that reasonable suspicion even when the driver is fully capable and operating entirely legally. The expansion of the impairment testing authority in connection with this natural suspicion risk means that older drivers taking certain medications are in a meaningfully elevated risk position compared to where they were under previous enforcement standards. Let me be absolutely clear about something critically important. Nothing in this guide is suggesting that you stop taking medications prescribed by your physician. You should never adjust, reduce, or discontinue any prescription medication without explicit guidance from the doctor who prescribed it. Doing so can have serious and dangerous medical consequences. What this update means is that you need to have a direct and honest conversation with your prescribing physician about your specific medications and their known effects on driving ability. Ask your doctor directly whether any of your current prescriptions carry warnings about operating motor vehicles. Ask whether the dosage timing can be adjusted to minimize any impairing effects during the hours when you need to drive. Ask whether any of your medications are known to produce effects that could appear as impairment to a law enforcement officer, even if you feel subjectively alert and capable. Your doctor can also provide documentation of your prescription medications that you should keep in your vehicle. If you are ever stopped and tested, having documentation showing your prescriptions are legally obtained and properly managed gives you important legal protection. Ignorance of medication-related impairment laws is not a legal defense in court. Protecting yourself requires proactive communication with your healthcare provider. The fourth rule change is the expanded definition of distracted driving, and this is the one that is catching drivers over 60 at a particularly high rate because it criminalizes behavior that many older drivers have practiced for years without being told it was becoming illegal. Most American drivers over 60 believe they already understand distracted driving laws. You cannot text while driving. You cannot make calls without a hands-free device. You have heard this for years and you believe you are compliant. The definition of prohibited distracted driving behavior has now been significantly expanded in most states, and the expanded definition is catching drivers who genuinely believe they are following the law. Here is the critical change. Simply holding your mobile phone in your hand while operating a vehicle is now a citable offense in most states, regardless of whether you are actively using the device. You do not have to be texting. You do not have to be making a call. You do not have to be looking at the screen. The act of holding the phone in your hand while the vehicle is in operation is the violation. This rule applies even when your vehicle is stopped at a red light. It applies when you are stopped in slow-moving traffic. It applies in a parking lot if your engine is running. The phone must be completely out of your hand and either mounted in an approved dashboard or windshield holder, placed in a cup holder, stored in a bag, or positioned anywhere that does not involve your hand making contact with the device. Law enforcement officers have received specific instruction to prioritize observation of drivers for this behavior. Officers are looking for phones in drivers' hands during traffic stops, at intersections, and during routine highway patrol. First offense fines begin at approximately $150 in most jurisdictions and increase substantially for repeat violations. Multiple distracted driving citations within a specified period can trigger automatic license review proceedings and mandatory driver improvement courses, which for a driver over 60 can put their license directly at risk. The practical solution is simple and requires only a small adjustment to your routine. Purchase an inexpensive phone mount that attaches to your dashboard or windshield. Before you start your engine, place your phone in the mount or store it out of reach. If you need to make a call, connect through your vehicle's Bluetooth system or use a wired or wireless earpiece that allows fully hands-free operation. If you need to look at directions or respond to a message, pull completely off the road in a legal parking area before picking up your device. One inexpensive phone mount, available at any electronics or automotive retailer for under $30, eliminates your exposure to this violation entirely. The fifth rule change involves parking distance from crosswalks. This is the violation that millions of Americans are committing right now without any awareness that the rules changed, and it is disproportionately affecting older drivers who have been parking in the same familiar spots near their regular destinations for years. Parking regulations near intersections and crosswalks have been updated, and the change is specific enough that drivers who park in familiar spots they have used regularly may find themselves receiving citations without understanding why. The updated standard in most jurisdictions now requires that no vehicle may be parked within 25 feet of a marked or unmarked crosswalk at an intersection. In many areas, the previously enforced distance was 15 to 20 feet from the crosswalk. That additional 5 to 10 feet may seem minor, but consider how many parking spots near intersections that drivers have used for years now fall within the prohibited zone under the updated measurement. From an enforcement perspective, officers do not need to observe a near miss or safety incident to issue a parking citation. Simply measuring the distance between your parked vehicle and the crosswalk marking is sufficient to issue a fine if your vehicle falls within the prohibited zone. Before parking near any intersection, measure your distance from the crosswalk carefully. Look for painted curb markings that may indicate no parking zones. When in doubt, move further from the intersection to ensure you are clearly outside the 25-foot restricted zone. A parking citation seems minor until you calculate the fine plus the insurance reporting implications, particularly for drivers over 60 for whom insurance companies are already more likely to apply age-based premium adjustments to any violation on record. The sixth rule, change, involves failure to yield violations, and the consequences for multiple violations within a short period have been dramatically tightened in ways that specifically threaten older drivers' licenses. Failing to yield the right-of-way to a pedestrian in any marked or unmarked crosswalk now carries a minimum fine of $200 in most states for a first offense. Beyond the financial penalty, a failure to yield violation now results in a mandatory point added to your driving record. In several states, a failure to yield conviction also triggers a mandatory traffic improvement course requirement that must be completed within a specified time frame. The license review threshold has also been tightened. 3 failure to yield violations within any 18-month period can now automatically trigger a formal license review proceeding in most jurisdictions. A license review can result in additional testing requirements, license restrictions, or in cases where a pattern of dangerous behavior is documented, license suspension. For any driver over 60 for whom a license suspension would mean loss of independence and the ability to manage daily life, this threshold is not abstract. It is a real and immediate risk that 3 traffic citations within a year and a half can trigger. Crosswalks that do not have traffic signals are specifically highlighted in current enforcement priorities. Drivers are legally required to yield to pedestrians in any marked crosswalk, regardless of whether a signal is present. If a pedestrian is in the crosswalk or clearly preparing to enter the crosswalk, you must stop and yield completely before proceeding. The following distance standard that every highway driver needs to know has also been formally updated in official law enforcement guidance documents. This change applies everywhere, but is particularly relevant for highway driving on long corridors like I-90. The previous common standard of 1 car length of following distance for every 10 miles per hour of travel speed has been replaced with a time-based standard. The current legally referenced minimum following distance is 3 seconds of travel time between your vehicle and the vehicle directly ahead under normal dry road conditions. Under adverse weather conditions, including rain, snow, fog, or ice, the recommended and legally referenced standard increases to 6 seconds of following distance. Along the I-90 corridor, which passes through mountain passes, plains with high wind exposure, and regions with extreme winter weather conditions depending on the time of year, the 6-second standard in adverse weather is not just a legal guideline, it is a genuine safety necessity. How do you measure 3 seconds of following distance? Watch the vehicle ahead of you pass a fixed point, such as a road sign, a bridge support, or a lane marking. Count the seconds from when they pass that point until you reach the same point. If you reach the fixed point in less than 3 seconds, you are following too closely under the current standard. If you are involved in a rear-end collision and investigation determines you were following too closely based on the current standard, you bear automatic liability for the collision regardless of the actions of the driver ahead of you. This is not a minor technicality. It is the legal standard that determines financial and legal responsibility when accidents occur. Give yourself space. 3 seconds minimum on dry roads, 6 seconds in bad weather. It is the simplest and most effective legal protection available to every driver on every highway. The highway rules taking effect along I-90 and across the national highway system right now represent the most significant update to daily driving standards that most American drivers over 60 have encountered in years. These are not theoretical future changes. Enforcement is active and immediate. Construction zones now carry enhanced fines at all times, regardless of worker presence. Slowing to a stop at highway merge points is now a citable traffic violation. Holding your phone in your hand while driving is now illegal, even at red lights and in slow traffic. Parking within 25 feet of a crosswalk at an intersection is now strictly enforced. Failure to yield carries mandatory points and potential license review consequences that specifically threaten older drivers' licenses. Following distance standards have been formally updated and apply in liability determinations. You are now informed. You are prepared. And that preparation is genuinely valuable because most drivers sharing the road with you tomorrow will not know any of this. Drive carefully, stay current with your state-specific DMV requirements. Consult your physician about any prescription medications you take regularly and make the small practical adjustments that keep you on the right side of every one of these updated regulations. Share this guide with every driver in your life and particularly with every driver over 60 whom you care about. The information here is too important to keep to yourself. This content is provided for general educational and informational purposes only. Traffic laws vary by state and jurisdiction. Always consult your specific state DMV website and qualified legal counsel for guidance applicable to your individual situation.